In December 2023, author Noah Dosier published a fantasy genre book titled Seeds in the Sand. He followed that up with a sequel to the book in January of 2025 titled Seeds in the Tide. The purpose of this video is to provide a refresher of Seeds in the Sand to prepare one to read the Seeds in the Tide book. The fantasy world of Samu consists of 4 neighboring countries, each originally inhabited by a different race. To the west, in the country of plains and lakes called Humania, lived the humans. East of there were the Lormish Isles, home to the aquatic halflings called Lorms. East of the Isles was Kagloris, where the magic-wielding Kaglorites live. And finally, north of all 3 is the vast frozen tundra, Itrasia, within which are the giants known as the Atrasi. The 4 peoples of the land lived in relative peace until the day the Kaglorites declared war on the humans. The magicians began by conquering the Lorms and enlisting their help in the war effort, but were ultimately betrayed by them, necessitating a retreat back to Kagloris. After many years of fruitlessly campaigning in the east, the humans were eager to find a quick, efficient way to end hostilities. They found it in the form of an explosive compound that could be used to taint soil and turn it into a biological bomb, championed by Samuel Roniege, adoptive son of the humans' king. Massive pumps were discreetly installed across Kagloris, and over time its soil was turned into an explosive. The humans contacted the Kaglorites, explaining the situation and begging them to surrender, but they were rebuffed. Seeing no better way to win the war, the humans had the eastern continent detonated, seemingly eliminating the entire population in what came to be known as the Kaglorite Massacre. Despite emerging from the conflict as victors, the humans were nonetheless haunted by what they'd done, and the king was assassinated by one of his own men shortly thereafter, something he could have prevented, but didn't, out of overwhelming guilt. Oracles exist in Samu. Oracles are individuals who are immortal and play host to a parasite that allows them to see the future. It wasn't long after the war's end that Deccan Eterden, a human oracle, had a vision of a future in which the world was destroyed by a single person who came to be known as the Arsonist. Samu's governments attempted to identify the person, but to no avail. As their citizens descended into despair, however, the oracle had another vision, that of a boy's birth by the light of a blue sun, a boy who would grow up to defeat the Arsonist and save the world. This boy's name was Cornelius Arkin, and came to be known as Destiny's Catalyst. When he came of age, he was given Kayam, a magical sword that could only be wielded by such a person, and he took on an apprentice, a Lormish boy named Matthew. The question then became one of the Arsonist's identity. But soon after Cornelius became a man, a small group of Kaglorites who had survived the massacre so many years ago began carrying out terrorist attacks against the humans and Lorms, led by the Dark Lord Zage Batur, who it seemed was obviously the villain shown in the prophecy. He and Destiny's Catalyst fought many times, with neither coming out on top, and it was some time later that the final piece of the plot against the Arsonist fell into place. Long ago, Kaglorites had been capable of imbuing inanimate objects with magical power, but the art was suddenly and mysteriously lost, preventing any new ones from being created. There were a few left from the olden days, however, including one of the humans' possession called the Orb of Desire. This Orb of Desire had the ability to grant wishes. As with all of the very few remaining magical artifacts, though, it had grown weaker with age and now could only be used for one single wish. Knowing this, the humans hid and locked away the orb, vowing to save the power for a matter of the utmost importance. After most of Samu's inhabitants became convinced of the Arsonist's identity, it was decided that Cornelius would use the orb to kill Zage. On the day of the ceremony, during which the key to the hidden temple where the orb is hidden and a map to it is to be given to Cornelius, all of the higher-ups in Humania gather in its capital city of Cobaltus for the occasion, including Deccan, Matthew, and Coria, the current queen. Other characters introduced include Nadia Torum, a high-ranking human warlord, and Adam Heffel, a teenager just recruited to Humania's military. Also there, however, are Zage and many of his compatriots, including his right-hand woman, Zuza. They sneak into the castle before the event. As the queen gives a speech, Matthew, tired from a night of travel, yawns, and his master has him go to the carriage to take a nap. When Cornelius is to be handed the box with the map and the key inside, the Caglarites attack, planning to use the orb's power themselves to wipe out all humans and Lorms. Deccan winds up with the box in the confusion and flees the city in Cornelius's carriage, heading east. When Matthew, who slept through the attack, awakens in the back and surprises the oracle, the older man tells the boy he's headed for the nearby city of Mester to hide out until the Caglarites have been suppressed, neglecting to inform him of his possession of the box. Matthew agrees to ride with him to Mester before going their separate ways, but a jostle of the carriage dislodges the box from the oracle's pockets, revealing his deception. Seeing that the jig is up, Deccan takes Matthew hostage and refuses to explain what he's doing with the map and key. When Deccan and Matthew arrive in Mester, home to a large drilling site owned by a massive conglomerate called the Gaudy Mining Group, they have an unlikely encounter with none other than Coria Roniage, Queen of Humania. She explains that she's headed east and enlists Deccan's help in escorting her, as she doesn't want to be accompanied by a large force in light of the recent attacks. Deccan initially refuses but concedes when Coria points out he could be jailed for disobeying his queen. She adds that she can serve as the oracle's bodyguard, to his complete disbelief. In a small town further east, Deccan finds, much to his dismay, Cornelius and a small army. Destiny's Catalyst explains that Zage, who fled Cobaltus after the attack, was captured by the villagers and is being interrogated, as he believes the Caglarite is responsible for Matthew's disappearance. That night, Zage convinces a passing Coria to free him, promising to give him up his violent ways. Then he turns to her and the others, but ultimately spares them when Deccan offers to help him escape Humania. Humania's eastern section is connected to that of the west via a thin plateau divided into two segments running alongside one another with insurmountable natural barriers separating them. One is a safe plain called the Peace Path, and the other an incredibly dangerous gauntlet. Cornelius and his group told Deccan they'd take the Peace Path in their forthcoming travels, meaning the Oracle is forced to set out on the other. Coria turns out to actually be an adept fighter, regularly training in the combative arts. Matthew begins to care for Deccan and accept that he shouldn't attempt to exactly emulate his master as he had been. The boy reveals to the others that he was made to be Cornelius's apprentice at the age of 6 and against his will. Zage gets free of his restraints at one point and attempts to kill the others. Once he is stopped, Deccan goes to execute him, but is convinced otherwise by Coria, who says that she and Matthew won't forgive him if he kills the Caglarite. Further along on their journey, Deccan comes across Cornelius again, and this time, Destiny's Catalyst uncovers the truth behind Matthew's disappearance. A chase begins, and strangely enough, Matthew and Coria remain with the Oracle. Zage uses red magic to collapse a bridge behind them, buying the group some time. Magic can only be wielded by Caglarites, and comes in two varieties. Red magic destroys all matter it touches, while blue magic can be used to create it, conjuring up what the caster desires. In both cases, only inanimate matter is affected, with flesh being left entirely unaffected by both red and blue magic. Spotting a village in the distance, Deccan and the others sneak in, hoping to find a map that might provide some clue as to a means of escape. The Oracle ends up recalling this area from a distant past, and that it is riddled with underground passages, one of which may take them far to the east. Zage purposefully gives away the others before they can enter this passageway, then flees. Deccan, Matthew, and Coria manage to get away regardless, however. There are numerous flashbacks detailing Deccan's past. He was once mortal, part of a tribe of human nomads consisting in part of his parents, wife, and young son. They inhabited a forest, as far as they know, which encompassed the world, but Deccan persisted in believing there lay something beyond. One day he was proven right as he led the others out of the forest and into a desert. They met a human oracle there, Kula. He explained that there were once five oracles, one for each race, and a master oracle to watch over all, but that the Lormish and master oracles went missing before his time. Deccan learned he was capable of becoming an oracle himself, a rarity. He and Kula went on a hunt sometime later, and Kula was mortally wounded. With no one else around and Kula rapidly dying, Deccan was forced to become an oracle, much to his wife's chagrin. Eventually, as the woman aged while her husband did not, she left him. Following the death of his son Anter from natural causes, Deccan exiled himself, deciding he was incapable of maintaining personal relationships given his immortality. That night, Deccan relates all of this to Coria and Matthew, before revealing what he intends to use the orb for. The oracle will wish that he had never been born, erasing himself from existence. Soon after, Deccan induces a vision of the future to aid in his quest and sees within it Matthew being killed by a wild animal in the temple housing the orb. Even if Deccan erases himself from existence, he notes there is a good chance the boy would still die, since Cornelius, without Deccan's interference, would still go to the temple himself along with his apprentice. And so Deccan is left with a conundrum. If he proceeds as planned, he's essentially dooming Matthew, who he's grown to care for, to an early grave. He, Matthew, and Coria eventually emerge from the tunnel, now near Humania's eastern border. Deccan correctly surmises why the boy and queen have stayed with him despite seemingly possessing no reason to. Both of them were miserable in their previous lives. Coria is in fact running away, planning to cross the border and shirk her royal duties. Deccan announces that he's through running from Cornelius. He doesn't reveal this, but he's decided to give up on his quest so that Matthew can be saved. The Lormish boy opts to stay with him while Coria continues on toward the border. Before Cornelius and his contingent catch up to him, Deccan hides the map and key, using them to bargain with upon the other man's capture of him. The oracle agrees to provide their location to Cornelius's word that Matthew won't be taken into the temple, where the orb is stored when Cornelius goes to retrieve it. From there, Cornelius takes Deccan to the border town of Yinit for the oracle to be jailed for his numerous crimes. As it turns out, however, the Caglarites have covertly taken over the town, and Zage is there, having come from where he left the others. A battle ensues with the Caglarites gaining the upper hand. Coria is passing by in the distance and, seeing her countrymen in trouble, reluctantly abandons her flight to assist them. She is defeated and captured by Zage, however, who takes her hostage, forcing Cornelius to provide him and his people with a boat, along with a map and key. Zage, Coria, and the other Caglarites then head east, for the map indicates that the orb is housed in the Isles. Deccan is initially given a life sentence, but is exonerated on the condition that he come with Cornelius, Nadia, Adam, and Matthew as they head east to rescue Coria and keep the orb from falling into Zage's hands. The first stop for Deccan and the others is Omu, capital of the Isles. Cornelius hopes the governor there, a Lorm named Ben, will know of a way to outpace the Caglarites despite their head start. Ben is revealed to be Matthew's father, a man who constantly kowtows to the humans despite resenting every second of it. His wife was taken when Matthew was 5 by a human royal to serve as a concubine, something Ben did nothing to resist against. Ben tells of the saltwater rapids running along the Isle's length. In theory, these could be ridden to greatly reduce the journey, but the rapids are littered with enough obstructions that no one has ever emerged from them alive. Cornelius decides to try it, however, using Deccan's precognitive abilities to anticipate where they'd have sunk so that it could be avoided. Coria and Zage grow close despite their statuses as kidnapper and captive as the journey to the temple continues. She proves to be a great leader, but one who balks at responsibility. Zage ends up catching feelings for Koria, stating that he will spare her when he uses the orb to kill the human race. One night, the Kaglerite reveals his past to her. When Zage was a young boy, his father Zofu believed fervently in their war with humans, but Zage didn't feel the same, not seeing the point. One day, a human horticulturalist, whom the Kaglerites took to calling Ravenhair, arrived in Kagloris with seeds he had developed for crops that could grow even in Kagloris' devastated soil. Ravenhair was accepted at first, only for Zofu to be killed, claiming that the human was the killer in his final moments. Furious, Zage killed Ravenhair, vowing to destroy all humans. Back in the present, Zage's second-in-command, Zuza, tells Koria, once he's out of earshot, that she'll be seizing the orb before Zage, using it to ensure that the queen dies along with all her people. Zuza also reveals that Zofu killed himself, framing Ravenhair to get Zage to hate humans. Deccan and the others wind up shipwrecked from attempting to travel along the saltwater rapids. They're able to rig up one of their lifeboats to large fish, but it can only carry 5. Deccan, Matthew, Cornelius, Nadia, and Adam are chosen to go and try to stop the Kaglerites. Zage's group intercepts them before they can reach the temple, kidnapping Matthew and sinking the other ship. Deccan, Cornelius, Nadia, and Adam use the wreckage to make rafts that they ride into the location of the temple. Koria and Matthew break free of their restraints on the Kaglerite ship and fire a cannonball into the top of the temple's entrance, caving it in. There is an old Kaglerite folktale telling of a prime wizard, a Kaglerite with magical abilities far surpassing those of ordinary magicians. Zuza, in this moment, awakens as one, and is able to destroy the roadblock in front of her all by herself. Cornelius faces Zage and is defeated, left to live afterwards. Zuza attempts to kill Koria, and it's at this point that Zage fully realizes the errors of his ways and changes sides. Nadia ends up taking the orb, revealed to have smuggled the Kaglerites into Humania in the first place. The woman then reveals, however, that for reasons unknown, she plans to destroy the entire world with the orb, not just humans and Lorms as the Kaglerites had intended. Fortunately, the orb crumbles when she attempts to use it, her wish not granted, as the artifact is too old to function any longer. When a wild animal attacks those in the temple, Deccan attempts to sacrifice himself, finding in that moment that Matthew and Koria have given him a reason to live. But Zage ends up saving him, awakening as a prime wizard himself, and dispatching the beast with his newly enhanced powers. Adam knocks out most of the other Kaglerites accidentally, but is believed to have done this by intention by the others, and is lauded for his actions. Further flashbacks on Deccan's past follow. Deccan ended up uniting his people under one banner, forming the kingdom that rules Humania today, where previously there had been only scattered independent tribes. Eventually, an expedition past their borders began, and they met the Kaglerites, forming an alliance with them. One day, however, Zeli, a well-respected Kaglerite man, died, and for reasons unknown, his kinsmen believed that he had been murdered by humans. Thus began the war between humans and Kaglerites, and Deccan, distraught to see this, gave up his throne to his chief advisor, Primos Roniaj. Deccan and the others are hailed as heroes on their return. Koria decides she'd like to begin actually fulfilling her obligations as queen. Where previously she'd been a figurehead for her adoptive brother, but Samuel rejects this, revealing that he leaked word of her deliberately abandoning her post. Humania and the Lormish Isles, he then reveals, will now be combined into one governing body called the Supremacy. It will be a representative democracy ruled by a council of 5, but Samuel implies that he'll be rigging the elections to bring himself to power. Matthew quits as Cornelius' apprentice, opting to stay with Deccan. Nadia is nowhere to be found in the wake of the battle at the temple, and she left behind a scrap of cloth, the insignia upon it the same one Deccan saw in his vision of the arsonist's destruction of the world. This concludes the recap of Seeds in the Sand, and you should now be ready to read Seeds in the tide. Thank you.